From the early years, we have even a Sahifah, or a collection of Hadith from Abu Huraira that was passed on to one of his students and so forth, that continued to exist as a separate work and continues to, and it exists nowadays. The Sahifah of Hamam ibn Munabbih. This Sahifah was passed on to his students. This is from Abu Huraira, Hadith from Abu Huraira, that he passed on to his student Hamam, who passes on to Ma'mar, who passes on to Abdul Razak. The collection of Hadith, it has about 136 Hadith from Abu Huraira that he dictated to his student Hamam. What you're going to find, why I even mention this, is that there were many early books, many early collections, usually under the name of Sahifah, some kind of Sahifah Sadaqa, for example, of Abdullah ibn Amr ibn al-As, who said that there's only two things in his life that he treasures, and that is the piece of land that the Prophet ﷺ had given him, and that's Sahifah, or that collection of Hadith from the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. Well, usually what happens is that what happens to these early works, why we don't see them around that much nowadays, is that they were incorporated into later works. So for example, in Musnad Ahmad is a very large collection of Hadith, and it is arranged according to the Sahabi who narrated the Hadith. Okay, so for example, all of the Hadith of Abu Bakr will be here, and then Umar, and then Uthman, and then Ali, and then for example Abu Huraira. So what you will find is that this book was passed on by Ma'mar to Abdul Razak, and also to other students, and Abdul Razak passes on to other students, and also to Imam Ahmad. And it continued to exist as a separate book. Okay, Sahifah al-Sahihah continued to exist as a separate book. And copies of it have been found recently that continue to pass on until I think something like the 8th or 9th century. But if you compare this book and you go to the Musnad Ahmad, you will find underneath the Hadith of Abu Huraira, with this exact same chain, all of the Hadith of Sahifah Sahihah except for 2 or 3 Hadith, I don't remember exactly. And exactly the same wording, everything. Well, if you go to other books, for example, other books taken from other students of Abdul Razak, you'll go to Sahih Bukhari, Sahih Muslim, you will find the exact same Hadith. For example, I think 99 out of the 137 are in Sahih Bukhari or Sahih Muslim, with the same chain going back to Abu Hurairah and so forth. So in this particular case, we see that the book continues to exist as its own book, but we also see how it is incorporated into other works. And this is basically what happened with the early works. There was many earlier works. Shaykh al-Adami in his dissertation shows us that many people had their own collections of hadith at that time. But what happened to them is that they were basically consumed or put into the larger later works. So the earlier works, the earlier smaller works, we don't have anymore. Many of them are lost. But we have reference to this guy having a book, this man having a book, this was the name and so forth. But they were captured and they have been collected in the later larger works. Now this has led some people, since some of these earlier books don't exist anymore, some people thought there were no early books. No, there were early books. But because of the nature of the way that Muhaddithin collected the information, they didn't refer to the book itself. It was rare. They did sometimes, but they would rarely refer to, like the Sahifah. They would just give you the chain, and you would not realize it's from that book unless you studied in detail and found, oh, these are all from this book.